Good day, class. I'm Miss Jade, and today we're going to talk about the ways of condensing text. So this is the fourth lesson for our first quarter, and coincidentally, it's also our last lesson. So before we go on to the different ways of condensing text, let's first look at this quotation from Albert Einstein. This will be a recurring theme, or the message of this quotation will be a recurring theme in this lesson. It says, if you cannot explain it simply, you do not understand it well enough. Um, in the past few lessons, we talked about reading critically and um, using language to explain something simply. Now, we're going to combine those skills that we learned from the last lessons, and we're going to apply them in this lesson here. So, before anything else, let's go on to our table of contents. So these are the things you're supposed to, or you're going to expect, or what we're going to discuss in today's lesson. First, of course, I'm going to give you the objectives of our lesson, and then after that, we have the lesson proper, where we're going to talk about summarizing, paraphrasing, and outlining, and then we have a few performance tasks and an exit ticket. Here we go. So first of all, of course, we have the objectives. The objectives of our lesson for today is, of course, identify the ways of condensing text. Like I said, I won't let you do something without us first identifying that process first. Next is understand the various techniques in condensing text and using a variety of academic texts. So there are various techniques and steps in condensing these texts. So we will see how those are done. And last, of course, we're going to be outlining, or we're going to outline reading text in various disciplines. Okay, so those are our objectives. Let's try to reach them as the lesson goes on. So first, we have identifying what is summarizing. So summarizing is a process that involves condensing a text into a shorter form. So all of us already know how to summarize. It is one of the most basic techniques that have or reading strategies that has been taught to us since we were maybe in grade 1 or in elementary school, because summarizing is one of the easiest tasks to do. But here, in the context of academic text, we do have a certain formality to summarizing, which is why we're reteaching it now. Okay, so we're condensing a text, meaning we're making it shorter, or we're making it denser, meaning that if a text has been condensed, it's shorter, but it holds more meaning. Okay, so it's shorter because we only get the most important parts. Okay, so when we are summarizing a certain text, we do not retain the unimportant or the extra parts. It's like when you're telling your parents about your day, or when you're telling someone how your day went. You're not going to tell them every single minute or every single thing that happens. You're not going to say, oh, in 9:01 I woke up, 9:02 I went to the bathroom, 9:03 I ate my breakfast. So it's not like that. So you're only going to tell them the most interesting or the most eventful parts of your day. That is the same thing that happens when you're summarizing a text. You only get the most interesting or most important parts of the text. A summary is normally 1/3 the length of the original text. A lot of my students in the past, they feel pressured when we say the one length or 1/3 the length. Remember that this one-third the length does not mean 1/3 the length in terms of words or characters. Just because an original text has, let's say, 150 characters or 150 words, that doesn't mean that the summary only has to have 50 words or 50 characters. It's a misnomer or a misinterpretation. Most summaries, yes, are 1/3 the length, but that is in terms of number of sentences or number of paragraphs. Okay, so we don't really need to stress about the number of words. So I have an example of a summary here. So you can pause the video now I'll give you a minute to pause the video to read the original text and the summary, and then we'll resume. Alright, so assuming that you've read the original text and the summary, the first thing you're going to notice without even really reading, just skimming and scanning, is the length. Okay? So nakikita natin, or we're seeing here, that the summary is considerably shorter than our original text. That's because a lot of the unimportant words or the unimportant terms have been removed, and only the main idea has been retained. So that is how we summarize. Okay? So how do we summarize in academic writing? What are the steps that we need to follow? So here is the first step. The first step to summarizing is always reading the work and understanding the purpose of the author or the author's intent. Okay? So when we are summarizing something, I always tell my students, read it at least twice. Okay? When you read the work at least twice, the first time you read it to get to know what the text is about. You read it to get an idea of what the text is about. And the next readings, the second, the third, the fifth, however many you need to understand it well enough, that's the time you take down notes, that's the time you highlight important terms or important ideas. That way, when we go on to the next few steps, we already have an idea of how we're going to summarize the original. Note that an incomplete reading would lead to an inaccurate summary, and an inaccurate summary is also considered plagiarism. There's a misconception in academic writing or in any type of writing that plagiarism only covers when we copy-paste certain information from the internet and claim it as our own. Yes, that is plagiarism, but another big part or another less known part of plagiarism is misrepresenting information from other authors. Okay? To give you an example, many people in America right now are being sued for plagiarism because they are misrepresenting or inaccurately summarizing a lot of information from researchers to fit their own political agenda. So let's try to make our summaries as accurate as possible so that we can avoid plagiarism. Okay, so that's the first step. We read the work and understand the author's intent. The second step is state or identify the major ideas. All right, so you have to identify the major ideas, whether it's for the entire source or for the paragraphs or the sentences. All right, so each paragraph or each sentences has their main idea, and we have to weigh whether or not those ideas are important or are they worthy of being retained in the summary. Because as I said, you can't keep all of the ideas within the summary. All right, so once you have identified or stated the major ideas, you then go on to restating the words into different ones. Now, when we say restating the words into different ones, it's a matter of telling the story into your own words, telling the text or retelling the text into your own words. In our example or in our comparison earlier, I told you that it's like telling your parents or telling your friends how your day went. Of course, when or how your movie or how the movie you watched went. When you're doing that, you're not going to tell them verbatim. You're not going to recite the script word for word, diba? You're also giving them your own version of how you understood the story. So that's how you're going to summarize a text. All right. So you're not just giving them word for word what you have summarized. You're going to also put it into your own words and into your own understanding. Because if you tell it like that, if you summarize something according to your own understanding and according to your own words, it's easier for the reader to digest and understand the summary. Okay? So that's our last or second to the last step. So those are that was our last step. So the shortening of those steps is SUM. Okay? So remember, when you have to summarize something, remember the acronym SUM. Shorten the text, use your own words, and do not remove the main idea. Okay? So remember that the main idea is the most important part of the summary. Now, Here is a reminder for all of you who are going to be summarizing certain texts. You need to first write down all of the information, of course, in a coherent and precise form. Still needs to be coherent, meaning the ideas and the sentences still need to have connection with one another. And of course, you need to keep in mind that the summary is a condensed version. All right, so it needs to be shorter, or it does not need to be too long. Okay, so that's why we do the summary, to condense it, to make sure that it's shorter and easier for our readers to understand and digest. Some words to consider when we are summarizing. Of course, we need to reduce the text, but we need to do it simply, meaning we need to use simpler words that are easier to understand. Briefly, meaning that if we have any definitions or explanations, we do it short. We need to give shorter versions than the original text. And of course, accurately. Okay, you do it simply, briefly, but we need to retain the accuracy of the information and the message of the original text. Next, clearly articulating condensed version. When we say clearly articulating, you are clearly explaining or expanding without forgetting that this is a condensed version. So, although you are using simple and brief terms, you still need to be very clear in those terms. Okay? And last, of course, we need to remember the thesis, the most important facts or ideas. Of course, you never, just like in last week's lesson with the thesis statement, we never forget the thesis statement. So if anything needs to be retained within our summary, it is the thesis statement or the most important facts or ideas. So those are the things to consider when we are using or making a summary. Next, we go on to paraphrasing. What is paraphrasing? Paraphrasing entails the use of rewording or rephrasing of the original text. When we say rewording or rephrasing, it is when you explain or restate a certain statement in your own words using your own understanding. I know that many of you have encountered this type of recitation back in junior high school or even now in senior high, where you are being asked to, explain this concept within your own words or in your own understanding. That's paraphrasing. Again, we already know, many of us already know how to paraphrase, how to explain something in the way we understand it, because we do this fairly easily. Next to summarizing, we also learn how to paraphrase. It's the next simplest process of reading that we learn in school. Okay? But again, we're reteaching it in EAPP so that you can get a context of it in our academic text. So, we do the rewording and rephrasing because we want to achieve clarity. Again, a lot of texts, they are hard to understand because there are certain terms and certain words that are fairly new or fairly specific to that field, that sometimes it's hard to understand those texts. So we try to achieve clarity by giving it better terms and more understandable words. Now, looking at the third description, it says that a paraphrase material is usually the same length as the original text. Again, we don't have to feel so pressured as matching the number of words or number of characters in the original text just because it says the same length. That usually pertains to number of sentences or number of paragraphs, as you can see in this example. So I'll give you another minute to pause the video and read our example. Alright then, so assuming that you've already read the original text and the paraphrased version, something you'll also notice is the paraphrased version, although it says that it has to be the same length as the original text, is somehow shorter. That's because some terms, in order to achieve clarity, have been rephrased into shorter ones. For example, we have here the term scribes and chronicles, which are both synonymous to each other and to the word writers. Then in the paraphrased version, they only said writers. So that's how we paraphrase something. We take some long terms, some less understandable terms, and then we rephrase it and we reword it into more understandable and more easier to easier or clearer terms. So, for example, right here is scribes and chronicles. Again, they substituted writers because those are synonymous, and it cuts down on the words that the reader needs to clarify. Okay, so that's our example. So how do we paraphrase something? So the steps in paraphrasing something is similar to the steps in summarizing. Of course, we need to start with reading. Reading and understanding the text, make sure that your paraphrase is also accurate. Because once again, if we do not have an accurate paraphrase, it could lead to plagiarism, which is a big no-no in academic writing. So what is the first step? Of course, is reading and understanding the text. And next is quite peculiar and quite strange, but you need to put away the original text. That way, you're not paraphrasing something word by word, but you're paraphrasing from your own understanding. Okay? When we paraphrase something word by word, that means that we don't understand the paraphrase. We're just changing the words as we go along. And that is incorrect. And it could lead to an inaccurate and less understandable version of the original text. So make sure that when you are paraphrasing, you understand the main idea of the original text first. So you put away the original. During your paraphrasing, you need to also consider how you're going to use the paraphrase. Is it going to be the main text itself? Or is it going to be just a part of a larger or longer text? Because that will also affect the length and the depth of your paraphrasing. Okay? So the next step is, once you're done with your own version or your paraphrase, make sure to read the original or check the original text if you have done it or if you have done it correctly. If you have paraphrased or you have retained the main message of the original text. Okay? And last, in every paraphrase, you need to acknowledge your source. Okay? So acknowledging our sources can be as simple as putting in an in-text notation or an in-text citation, or you can also use the words according to and then the name of the author, or as stated by and then the name, or as said by the name of the author in the year and then the year the text was published. That way, we can give acknowledgement to the person who actually wrote those ideas. Because remember, your goal is to create your own interpretation of the ideas that someone else has said. You are not giving your own ideas, you are simply restating them. Okay? So, since you are restating an already existing idea, we need to acknowledge the source of those ideas. Okay? So, that is how we paraphrase. So, the difference between paraphrasing and summarizing. So, what is the difference between these two? First, we need to realize, or we need to remember, that summarizing is a way of condensing a text to make things easier for the reader to digest and to understand. Okay, so we're shortening it a very long text or a long text to make it easier for our reader to understand and read. The main difference between summarizing and paraphrasing is that in summarizing, you can be selective in writing your summary, meaning you can select, pick, and choose what information will be included in your summary. Okay, so not everything in the original text will go into the summary, but in paraphrasing, you need to cover each piece of information. You can't pick and choose information. You can pick and choose the words that you can retain, but you cannot pick and choose the words or the ideas that need to be retained. Every piece of information needs to be retained in the paraphrase. Okay, so remember that in summarizing we are selective, okay, but in paraphrasing we are covering each piece of information. Okay, that's the difference. But they are similar in a very important way. Summarizing and paraphrasing are similar because they both serve to make concepts easier to understand for the reader through slightly different methods. So if you pass or if you write a summary or a paraphrase and it's somehow harder to understand, then something went wrong along the way. You have to do the summary and the paraphrase all over again. All right, so remember, when we are doing these two things, we need to make the concepts easier to understand. Okay, so that's summarizing and paraphrasing. Now, summarizing and paraphrasing are also similar in that they are presented to us in paragraph form. Okay, they are written and presented in paragraph form. But the next type of condensing text or the next way of condensing text is different because it is not written in a paragraph form, and that is outlining. Outlining, as you can see here, is a process of organizing information gathered from reading. Now, in organizing that information, you are not writing it in paragraph form, as I said before, because you are using an outline. Please remember that when it ends in ing, that is the process. But if it ends in ine, that is the tool or that is the product. Okay, outlining is the process, outline is the product. So we use an outline, which is a skeletal framework that includes ideas separated by a numbering system. Okay, so outlining makes it possible for us to arrange the ideas and details. I'm sure some of you already have an idea of what an outline is. This is commonly used in note-taking, in handouts, even in books that you have been given or you have read in schools. So it's not a new method of condensing a text, but not a lot of people know that not a lot of people know the term outline. So this is what an outline looks like. Coincidentally, these are also the two kinds of numbering systems. So traditionally, okay, the traditional numbering system uses symbols, letters, and numbers, or a mix of all of these. Even in MS Word or Microsoft Word, we use shapes like circles, squares, arrows. So that's the traditional numbering system. The traditional numbering system is used, again, note-taking, making lists, rankings, so it's more widely used. The modern numbering system only uses numbers. So we have 1, and if we have any ideas or subtopics under the topic 1, we have 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. In academic writing, we mostly use the modern outline system or the modern numbering system because it is more uniform, it is more formal looking than the traditional. Here is an example of the outlines. As you can see here, it looks a little bit chaotic because of the different symbols. It looks a little informal, which is why we use the modern outline. And as you can probably observe, the numbers do not align with one another. The indent of the number signifies that this number is this is the main idea, and these are all subtopics under this main idea. All right. So it's easier for the reader to identify which ideas belong to what topic. So those are the two kinds of numbering systems. Again, in academic writing, we mostly use modern outline because it is more formal and it is easier to identify what ideas fall under which topics. So we have two types of outlining. Actually, there are three, but the third type of outline is the least commonly used and is not particularly used in academic writing. So the two types of outline are topic outline, which includes specific words or phrases, and the sentence outline, which includes sentences or full sentences. So I'll show you the two and explain how one can be better than the other in certain situations. First, the topic outline. The topic outline is good to use when you're in sort of a rush, while you're reading something and you want to take note of the main ideas and the details that you'd like to organize before you forget what you're trying to outline. It's good to use when you are in an informal situation, when you really just need to take notes and remember. Okay, so that's when we use the topic outline. It's also good if you have a good memory that goes along with the words and the phrases that you're going to put in the topic outline. Because let's face it, not a lot of us can remember what these words can mean, especially after a while. So I remember back in school, I used to use topic outline, but then I would forget what the terms meant, so I would have to go back to the teacher's handouts. So try to, so if you need more of a specific and more of a detailed outline, we go to the sentence outline. The sentence outline again uses full sentences, and it is best used when you are planning or you are arranging ideas for an essay, or when you are revising or reviewing certain texts. So when you are planning your essay, you're trying to organize all of your ideas, and you're in that pre-writing stage, it's good to use the sentence outline so you can plan and you can have those ideas in your head. Okay, so you can have all of those ideas in your head, write them down, make sure the organization is good, make sure that all of the subtopics are under the right main ideas. So that's when we use the sentence outline. Okay, so the third type is the paragraph outline. Again, it's not we don't really teach it in academic writing because it's more on each bullet point needs to have one whole paragraph, and it's a little bit too complicated for academic writing, so we don't use that. So for the purposes of this lesson, we only have topic outline and sentence outline. So those are the two types of outline. So that's our lesson for today. Thank you for listening. Big thanks to Miss Hannah Castaño for preparing these slides for all of the EAPP teachers. If you have any concerns, you can message me in my email, jdomingo@ucc.ph. And for my students who are watching this, here is the explanation for your written and performance task. So here is your individual assessment. You'll have 10-item quiz for today's lesson that will be assigned to you after our class, and you have 1 hour to answer that. And then individual performance task, you'll be given a template. There is an activity or an article that you will be summarizing, paraphrasing, and outlining. All of the specific instructions are in the template. Please read them carefully. So along with the rubric to the summary and the paraphrasing. So remember to make it accurate, make it brief and simple for the summary, and of course the accuracy of the paraphrase needs to be maintained. So that's the performance task. Again, thank you for listening and watching our video lesson for ways of condensing text. That has been our last lesson for this quarter. Thank you, and stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye!